And that's sort of that's where the West is powerful, I would say. Like, we have a really well-developed mythology of the exploratory hero. But where we're not so well-developed is the second part, because in the second part of the classic hero story, you're supposed to come back and communicate about what you've found. And so there's a individual exploration element, and then there's a communicate and update the culture element. And both of those are equally important, and it's something that we don't do well. We don't have much respect for tradition in the West, and it's a really, really big problem, because the ethical responsibility of a human being is to take the dead culture, so that's the dead father or the dead God, and to revivify it with attention and communication. And you fail to do that, then everything disappears. And we are failing to do that. We're leaving it all behind instead. It's not a good idea. You know, if the old gods die, as Nietzsche said they had, new gods swoop in very rapidly, and if you think the old god was bad, you wait till the new gods get a hold of you. So, well, we saw what happened in the 20th century, right, with all the ideologies that sprang up in the absence of classical religious belief. It's like, okay, you're not so thrilled with Catholicism if you think about that as, you know, the fundamental tradition of the West. You know, with the witch burnings and the Inquisition and all that, it's like, yeah, well, get a load of the Nazis and then see what you think. So, or the communists for that matter. It's like from bad to worse in an unimaginable way, you know. So, and it's partly because those archaic systems, those archaic religious systems, they weren't ideologies. They're a whole different class of thing. And we don't understand them very well, and it's not good, because you cannot live without understanding them. You don't know who you are. And then you fall prey to weird mental diseases like nihilism, that's one, and the other one is ideological possession. So you become a totalitarian or a nihilist, and that's a bad outcome. And you might think, well, what's the alternative? Well, you know what happens in Pinocchio, right? You've watched Pinocchio? Okay, I often show Pinocchio to this class, but I don't know if I'm going to do that this year. But anyways, Pinocchio, he's a puppet, marionette. Someone else is pulling his strings. He has a wooden head. He's not very bright. He hasn't banged around the world at all. He's got a good father, the old Geppetto, who really would rather that he was a real boy, right? A real person. So he's the kind of father that wants to produce an individual and not a slave. So, and that's why, you know, in his workshop it's all friendly and there's a nice fire and he's making toys and there's lots of music. It's like, go Geppetto, he's a good guy. So he makes this little puppet and he sends him out in the world. He says, go be a real boy. Well, Pinocchio runs into a whole class of different obstacles. One is evil, right? That's the coachman, and the Italian stereotype guy who makes him a dancing puppet celebrity, which I think is pretty funny. I mean, that's really prescient, you know, because you might think, well, what's the goal of your typical boneheaded, you know, mid-adolescent in North America? It's like unearned celebrity. Well, that's exactly what Pinocchio goes for first. And that doesn't work out so well because he ends up a slave, and then the next thing that happens is he capitalizes on the fact that he's vulnerable and pretends he's sick and goes off for a vacation under the direction of the coachman, who's basically Satan in disguise. And then he goes out to Pleasure Island, and meets all the delinquents who are just like Nazis, and it turns out that in fact the whole ploy is to enslave everyone, to deprive them of their voice, that's the donkey's braying, and to make them into slaves. Pretty damn horrifying, and that movie came out about the same time that the Nazis were really, you know, grasping power in Central Europe. It's like they got it exactly right. Here's what's really going on behind the scenes. So, and then what happens? Well, Pinocchio turns halfway into a braying donkey because, you know, he's got off the path, and in order to get back on it, he tries to go home. But it's too late. He's grown up. You can't go home. He's not a kid anymore. Goes home and Dad isn't there. Surprise, surprise. Because once you grow up and you go home, Dad isn't there. It's just another human being. So then what happens? Well, then he has to go into the ocean. Now that's particularly weird, right? It's like, there he is, half donkey, he's a puppet. The dove comes down and drops him a message from God. It's like the Holy Spirit descending, except it's actually from the blue fairy, weirdly enough. And the message says, you have to go to the deepest part of the ocean and rescue your father. It's like, yeah, that is what you have to do if you don't want to be a bloody puppet donkey. You have to go down into the depths and find your dead father. And you have to revivify him. And that's what happens. So Pinocchio goes way down there to the deepest depths and finds Monstro, who's a monster so terrible that the fish swim away just at the sound of his voice, just like, what's his name? He who you shall not be named. Voldemort, right? You can't even say his damn name. Same with Monstro. Pinocchio goes down there, goes into the whale. What happens? Geppetto says there's no getting out of this. There's no getting out of this. We just have to sit here and cook fish. And Pinocchio thinks, cook! And then he starts breaking up all the chairs and everything, and his father's freaking out. It's like, what are you doing, breaking all these chairs? What are we going to sit on? And then Pinocchio lights them on fire. He's a master of fire. It's a shamanic ritual, but he is a master of fire. That's what a human being is. He gets everything burning. Of course, Geppetto's all freaked out about that, because what are they going to sit on? And Pinocchio thinks, who cares about sitting? We're going to solve the problem once and for all. And so then the whale turns into a fire-breathing dragon, which is a pretty damn weird thing for a whale to do. Half kills Pinocchio. He washes up on shore dead, but he saves his father. And then at the very end of the movie, he's lying on his bed, all drowned. They're all like having a... So he's a dead puppet now. It's like, do you want to be a live puppet or a dead puppet? Well, maybe the dead puppet is better than the live puppet. It depends on where you're going. So then he's on the bed. The blue fairy comes down and says, well, you've been honest and courageous. Bang. Now you're real. You know, and then they have a little party. And that's just exactly right. They got that exactly right. So that's part of the hero mythology, is the rescuing of the father.
Why do you have to rescue the father?
Because otherwise you're a corpse. Like, you're a historical creature. You're a cultural creature. You cannot live without your culture. You think you can, but you can't. It disappears, and you don't even... Look, I'll give you an example. In the Mesopotamian creation myth, which I'm going to tell you about next week, one of the things that happens is that the first round of gods, so they're like primordial forces, they're pretty damn careless. And they kill their father. And they make this place to live on his corpse. Okay, that's where we live. We live on the corpse of our ancestors because we live in this society. It's dead. It's the product of dead people. So it's got this dead element, but we're living on it. Okay, they're very careless. They kill it so that they render it completely dead. Well, what happens is Tiamat, who's the mother of chaos, she comes flooding back and she thinks, oh, you killed the thing that protects you. You just wait to see what happens. And that's exactly it. You kill the thing that structures you. You won't know it. It's like Nietzsche's prediction from the death of God. It's like, you killed this. You think, oh, it doesn't make any difference. It's like, wrong. It's like the Striders protecting the hobbits. You get rid of that thing that protects you, and chaos comes flooding in, and you have no idea what's possible. We do, though, because we lived through the 20th century. We know exactly what's possible. You know, hundreds of millions of unnecessary deaths. That's what's possible. We're lucky we didn't blow the whole damn thing up. So, and we still could. So, people pursuing their dead ideologies. You don't rescue the dead father, you're the puppet of death. That's what you are. Okay, on that cheery note...